Hello and welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to Define Disaster. This is Battlefield 4, and today, as per user request, we're going to be taking a closer look at the G36 Carbine with all its strengths and weaknesses. Now, before we get started on talking about the G36, the stats it has, what this basically means in combat performance, and if this gun really is any good, I'd like to quickly give a shout out to MXI Tube for suggesting this video. I hope I'm able to answer your questions regarding the capabilities of the G36 with this video. With all that being said, let's move on to the stats of the G36C. We have a standard Carbine damage model with a starting damage of 24 and a minimum damage of 15.4 from 50 meters and beyond that point. The fire rate is relatively slow, making this weapon not very much suited for close quarter combat at 650 rounds per minute. The magazine is a standard 30+1 or 31 bullet magazine. Moving on to the reload times, we have a not too shabby yet not very competitive 2.3 seconds short reload, that is with one or more bullets left in the chamber, and a 2.85 long reload, that is when you have shot through all your bullets. The recoil of this gun is actually surprisingly high given its fire rate. With a vertical recoil of 0.3 degrees, this is actually something you are going to have to compensate and consider, especially when shooting at targets at longer distances. The horizontal recoil, on the other hand, is very easy to manage. For a matter of fact, doesn't need to be managed at all because it is almost non-existent at 0.115 degrees, both to the left and to the right. This is ideal for long distance engagements because, of course, it is equally balanced on both sides. The first shot recoil multiplier is once more relatively surprisingly high for this gun, given that we're talking about 650 rounds per minute and not an AEK at 1.85 of a multiplier. It is, however, not the end of the world or this gun. It's just something you're going to have to heavily compensate and consider when tap firing this gun for longer distance engagements. Moving on to the accuracy of the gun with an ADS value of 0.3. This is nothing surprising here. It is a carbine after all. This shouldn't hinder the performance of the gun too much other than maybe those long distance engagements. And with an ADS, a hipfire value while standing and moving of 2.5, this is better actually than quite a few assault rifles out there. Obviously no competition for something like a PDW, and certainly nothing unusual for a carbine. Now, with all that being said, where does this leave us? What is the G36 good at, if anything at all? Well, you have a little bit of a juxtaposition, a problem here. The carbine generally have a damage model like this one that does not suit long distance combat. We are talking here about a 7-shot kill from a distance already of 44 meters and out. So the weapon isn't very much suited for long distance combat, which is dictated though by its fire rate. Furthermore, we have this recoil added with the first shot recoil multiplier, making this gun relatively unruly for its fire rate even when tap firing, once more making it ineffective at longer distances. So there must be something to kind of redeem this gun. There's got to be some quality then that makes it usable in close quarters. Well, not really. It's hard to bring back a gun with a fire rate of 650 rounds per minute and a standard, if even actually worse, damage model than something like an assault rifle, just a standard carbine damage model, and make it competitive for close quarter. Hipfire may not be bad, but it's not going to make up for the lack of fire rate. Reload times are certainly nothing to write home about. If you were to compare this to something like the M416, there would be a night and day difference. You can literally die in the extra time it takes you to reload your gun than it takes somebody with something like an M416. When it comes to attachments, the G36 doesn't really offer much that we can change. The big problems of the G36 are its miserable fire rate and its bad damage model when it comes to longer distance combat. You can't change that with any attachment in the game. You can't change the fact that you're going to be requiring 7 or maybe even 8 bullets to kill your enemy above a range of roughly 50 meters. What we can do though is help with that first shot recoil multiplier, make tap firing a little bit more comfortable, and for that we can use something like the angled foregrip. Otherwise, it's really up to you. I run it with a laser sight because I run most of my guns with laser sights, so I can hip fire a little bit more. If you're looking at a TDM situation and you are using this at close quarter because you desperately have to collect some kind of decent footage for your YouTube channel like me, then you may want to slap on a suppressor. Otherwise, there's no real point because you're using this gun certainly wrong if you are in close quarter. Even though it may be a pain to use at medium to long range, it is there, still doable, while in close quarter it becomes an absolute nightmare. So that verdict is kind of already a little bit leaked out in that list of attachments that I use. It's not a good gun. For a matter of fact, it's one of the worst guns in Battlefield 4 because it doesn't have even a small role in which it succeeds. I notice this very often. There's a lot of guns that are very infrequently used, however, at least have one situation in which they excel perfectly. A great example for this is the Groza. It has this crazy damage model on fire rate and ridiculous recoil. It's unusable at anything beyond 20 meters. However, if you get within 20 meters of your target, you're gonna wreck him. It may not be very often that you can close the gap like that on something, say, like Conquest or Rush, but when it happens, you have a clear advantage. So at least those guns have a certain function and purpose, whereas the G36 just really seems like a much worse version of the AK-5C. Sure, it's got a bit of a better fire rate, but in the end, it's got a ridiculous recoil for that fire rate, and it's basically unusable at any distance. So if you really love the G36, the best way to run it is medium to long range if you have to, but if I could give you a recommendation, would say to stay away from the G36 because it really isn't the gun you're looking for. Now, I hope I've answered all the questions that surround this. Was, of course, a user request to talk about the G36, so I hope I've been able to answer your questions about this guns. If you guys out there have any suggestions that you would like to see running on this channel, any guns that you would like to have reviewed, any comparisons, any analysis, or you have an opinion on this video on my analysis of the G36, feel free to, of course, leave that down below in the comments. It's always interesting to see what you guys think. Sometimes you agree, sometimes you don't. Maybe the console players out there maybe love the G36, or maybe I'm just a little bit of a hater and am hating this gun for no reason. But with all that being said, thank you very much for watching, and I hope to see you in the next Battlefield 4 video.